Dr. Kethavar's four eyes blinked in sequence as he stared at the holographic display floating above his desk. The data streams showed endless graphs, charts, and video recordings of human behavior from across the galaxy. Each piece of evidence made him more uncomfortable than the last. His research partner, Velnis, sat across from him in their sterile white laboratory. Her tentacles moved nervously as she scrolled through her datapad, occasionally making worried clicking sounds with her beak. "Look at this footage from Colony 7, Kethavar said, projecting a video into the air between them. Human construction. Worker Minho jumps into a burning building to save a Zentari child he had never met before. The building collapsed 30 seconds after he got out. He could have died for a complete stranger." Velnis shuddered, her green skin turning a pale yellow. "That's not normal behavior. Any rational being would calculate the risk first. The probability of success was only 12%. "Exactly my point," Kethavar continued, switching to another video. "Here we see human merchant Yu Jin giving away half her food supplies to refugees during the food shortage on Station Beta. She went hungry for 3 days because of it. No payment expected, no future benefits gained. The alien scientists had been studying humanity for 8 long months. The Galactic Confederation had asked them to evaluate whether humans deserved full membership in their peaceful alliance of civilized worlds. Every species had to prove they were mentally stable and logically sound before joining. Humans were failing spectacularly. Their decision-making process is completely broken," Velnis said, pulling up more files. "Human female Haye Jin spent her entire life savings to pay for medical treatment for an injured Kree she found on the street. Medical treatment that wasn't even guaranteed to work." Kethavar nodded grimly. "And look at this military footage. Human soldier Taemin charged directly at 50 enemy fighters to protect the evacuation ship full of civilians. 50 enemies. He was one person with a basic rifle." "Did he survive?" Velnis asked. "Somehow, yes. But that's not the point. The point is he did it at all. No sane creature would make that choice." The evidence kept piling up. Humans who shared their last meal with hungry aliens. Humans who worked extra shifts to help struggling families. Humans who risked their lives, their money, and their futures for people they barely knew. "They call it compassion," Kethavar said, pronouncing the human word carefully. "But we call it mental illness." Velnis set down her datapad and looked at her partner. "So what do we tell the Confederation Council?" "The truth," Kethavar replied, sealing their final report with his genetic signature. "Humans are psychologically unstable. They make decisions based on emotions instead of logic. They cannot be trusted with full membership in civilized galactic society." He paused, looking at one last video of a human child sharing candy with alien refugees. "They're simply too dangerous to themselves and others." The transport ship shuddered as it docked at Crossroads Station, and Dr. Kethavar felt his stomach turn. Not from the landing, but from what lay ahead. 3 months had passed since their damning report about humanity, and now the Confederation Council wanted more evidence. "Remember," Velnis whispered as they walked through the busy corridors, "we're here as neutral observers. The humans can't know we're studying them." Crossroads Station was unlike anything Kethavar had seen before. The massive space structure housed nearly 50 different alien species, all trading, talking, and living together in relative peace. But what struck him most was how comfortable the humans seemed among all these strange creatures. They found their assigned observation post on level 7, overlooking the station's main entertainment district. The room was small but perfectly positioned, with one-way viewing panels and advanced recording equipment already installed. "Look at this setup," Velnis said excitedly, activating the surveillance systems. "We can monitor audio from 12 different locations, track individual movement patterns, and record everything in crystal-clear detail." Below them, the evening crowd was gathering. Aliens of all shapes and sizes wandered between shops, restaurants, and bars. But Kethavar's attention focused on one particular establishment that seemed to draw humans like a magnet. Murphy's Bar sat on the corner of the main plaza, its warm yellow light spilling out onto the walkway. Even from their high perch, they could hear laughter and music drifting up through the station's air circulation system. "Perfect," Kethvar muttered, adjusting the audio receptors to focus on the bar. A place where humans gather and drink alcohol. Their true nature should reveal itself quickly. Within minutes, they were recording everything. Human cargo worker Seung Ho was buying drinks for a table full of Zentari traders he'd apparently just met. The Zentari looked confused, but pleased by the unexpected generosity. Irrational resource expenditure, Velnis noted in her log. Subject is spending his earnings on strangers with no possibility of return on investment. At another table, human engineer Do Yun was teaching a group of young Kelleran refugees how to play a human card game. The refugees had fled their war-torn planet months ago and still looked nervous around most aliens, but they were laughing and relaxing with Do Yun. Emotional manipulation, Kethvar recorded. Human subject is using entertainment to lower the psychological defenses of vulnerable individuals. Near the bar, human medic Mi Jung was looking at the injured wing of a Thraxian pilot. She worked carefully, using her own medical supplies to treat the alien's wounds. When the pilot tried to pay her, she refused and just smiled. Clinical evidence of delusional behavior, Velnis whispered. The human is providing valuable medical services without compensation, but what disturbed the alien scientists most was how natural it all seemed. The humans weren't putting on a show or trying to impress anyone. They just automatically helped, shared, and connected with every alien they encountered. This is worse than we thought, Kethvar said, watching human. Bartender So Young give free soup to a homeless Vec. They're not just mentally unstable. They're completely unable to control their irrational impulses. Day after day, Kethvar and Velnis sat in their observation post, recording every human interaction they could find. Their files grew larger, each morning, filled with what they saw as overwhelming evidence of human mental illness. This is getting ridiculous, Velnis said, reviewing footage from the previous night. She pointed to her screen where human construction worker Min Ho was sitting on a bench, sharing his small lunch with a tiny Vec child who looked lost and hungry. Look at the data, she continued, pulling up nutritional scans. Min Ho only brought enough food for himself. After sharing, his calorie intake dropped below recommended levels. He went hungry for the rest of his work shift because he fed some random alien child. Kethvar shook his head as he watched the recording. The little Vec had been crying, probably separated from its family in the busy station. Min Ho had simply walked over, knelt down and started sharing his sandwich without saying a word. Mental deficiency, Kethvar muttered, adding the incident to their growing database. Complete inability to prioritize personal survival needs, but that was just one example among hundreds. Every single day brought new cases of humans acting in ways that made no logical sense. They recorded merchant Eugene abandoning a profitable sale to help lost travelers find their ship. She spent 2 hours walking them through the confusing station levels, missing 3 potential customers, while earning nothing for her time. Economic irrationality, Velnis noted. Subject chose to help strangers over personal financial gain. Then there was Security Officer Jinwoo, who spent nearly an hour helping an elderly Thraxian navigate the station's complex elevator system. The old alien could barely walk and kept getting confused by the digital displays. Jinwoo, patiently, guided him level by level, even carrying his heavy bags. 47 minutes of uncompensated labor, Kethvar recorded. Subject showed no signs of frustration, despite missing his scheduled patrol duties. The most shocking incident involved human trader Hye Jin, who was in the middle of negotiating a major cargo deal worth thousands of credits. Halfway through the meeting, she noticed an injured Cree limping past her table, bleeding from a damaged leg. Without hesitation, Hye Jin abandoned her negotiation to help the wounded alien to the medical center. By the time she returned, her business partners had left for another deal. Estimated financial loss 3,000 credits, Velnis calculated, for helping a complete stranger who couldn't even pay for medical treatment. It's a pattern, Kethvar said, staring at their data files. Every human on this station shows identical symptoms. They consistently choose helping others over helping themselves. They waste resources on strangers. They take unnecessary risks for no personal benefit. He pulled up video after video. Humans giving directions to confused aliens. Humans buying food for hungry travelers. humans fixing broken equipment that didn't belong to them, humans teaching alien children how to read station signs. This isn't just individual mental illness, Velnis realized, her tentacles curling with worry. The entire human species appears to be suffering from the same psychological disorder. Severe empathy dysfunction, Kethvar agreed grimly. They're completely unable to think rationally about their own interests. The evening at Murphy's bar had been peaceful until the 8 black uniformed soldiers walked through the entrance. Kethvar immediately recognized the hegemony insignia on their shoulders and felt a surge of excitement. This was exactly what he'd been waiting for. Recording at maximum resolution, Velnis whispered, her tentacles dancing over the control panel. This should finally give us clear evidence of human aggressive tendencies. The hegemony enforcers moved like predators, their heavy boots echoing across the bar's wooden floor. These weren't regular soldiers, but elite operatives known throughout the galaxy for their brutal efficiency. Their leader, a massive alien named Thexgan, had scars covering half his face and cybernetic implants where his left eye should have been. Down in the corner booth, a quiet Cree family was sharing dinner. Father Velkesh worked as a maintenance worker on the lower levels, trying to build a new life after fleeing the war on his homeworld. His wife Niera kept their 7-year-old daughter Silni close, always worried about drawing unwanted attention. Tonight, they had drawn exactly the wrong kind of attention. "Well, well," Thexgan said loudly, his voice cutting through the bar's gentle music. "Look what we have here. Another family of refugees taking up space meant for real citizens." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Conversations stopped mid-sentence as every alien in the bar felt the sudden danger. This wasn't just casual prejudice. The hegemony had been pushing aggressive policies against refugee populations across the sector. Sectors getting crowded with undesirables. Thexgan continued, making sure his voice carried to every corner of the bar. His squad spread out behind him, hands resting casually on their weapon belts. Maybe it's time someone reminded these parasites where they belong. Kethvar watched his monitoring screens with growing anticipation. Throughout the galaxy, this was how conflicts started. Aggressive forces would target vulnerable populations. Tensions would rise and usually violence would follow quickly. "Watch the crowd dynamics," he instructed Velnis. "Standard pattern is immediate evacuation by non-involved parties." And indeed, that's exactly what happened. The Zentari merchants at the bar quickly finished their drinks and headed for the exit. A group of Thraxian traders gathered their belongings and left without making eye contact. 2 Kelleran engineers paid their bill and hurried away. This was normal, intelligent behavior. When faced with potential violence, rational beings removed themselves from danger. Every species in the galaxy followed these same conflict avoidance protocols, every species except one. "Fascinating," Velnis breathed, staring at her screens in disbelief. The humans weren't leaving. Construction worker Minho continued eating his dinner, but his posture had changed. Merchant Yujin kept talking to her companion, but her eyes tracked every enforcer movement. Security officer Jin Wu appeared to be reading his data pad, but his free hand had shifted closer to his emergency communicator. "They're staying," Kethvar whispered. "In the face of obvious danger, they're actually staying." The silence in Murphy's bar felt like a held breath. Velnis's recording equipment captured every micro-expression, every slight movement, as the humans around the room seemed to communicate without words. It was subtle, almost invisible, but the alien researchers noticed it immediately. Construction. Worker Minho glanced toward Merchant Yujin. She nodded almost imperceptibly. Security officer Jin Wu shifted in his seat, catching the eye of bartender So Young. Engineer Doyon put down his drink and straightened his shoulders. "They're coordinating," Velnis whispered, her voice filled with scientific fascination and growing alarm. "Without verbal communication, without technology, how are they doing?" "This?" Kethvar leaned closer to his monitors. "Primitive pack behavior. They're recognizing a threat to their territory, but the humans weren't acting territorial. They were acting protective. And their focus wasn't on defending their space. It was on defending the terrified Cree family they'd never met before." Thexgan seemed to sense the shift in atmosphere and decided to escalate. His squad moved closer to the corner booth, forming a tight circle around the frightened refugees. The enforcer's cybernetic eye glowed red as he scanned the family with obvious disgust. "Papers," he demanded again, his voice turning harsh. "Show me your settlement authorizations now." Father Velkesh's hands trembled as he reached into his worn jacket. Of course he had no official papers. Refugees never did. The bureaucratic process for legal settlement took years, and most families couldn't wait that long for safety. "Please," Velkesh said quietly, "we're not causing trouble. We work hard. We pay our bills. We just want—" "I didn't ask for excuses," Thexgan snarled, grabbing the papers and tearing them in half. "I asked for authorization." Little Silny began crying, the sound cutting through the tense air like a knife. The 7-year-old had been through so much already: the war on her homeworld, the dangerous escape, months of uncertainty. Now, these frightening soldiers were surrounding her family again. Her father tried to comfort her, pulling her close and whispering gentle words in their native language. But Thexgan saw this as defiance rather than protection. "Shut that noise up," the enforcer barked. When Velkesh tried to shield his daughter, Thexgan's patience snapped completely. His armored hand lashed out, striking the child across the face with enough force to knock her from her chair onto the hard floor. The entire bar went dead silent. At the counter, human construction worker Tai Min had been quietly finishing his beer after a long shift building new residential quarters. He was tired, dirty, and just wanted to go home to his small apartment. He'd never spoken to the Kree family, didn't even know their names. But when he saw that little girl hit the ground, something fundamental shifted inside him. Taemin stood up slowly, his work boots clicking against the floor. He wasn't particularly tall or muscular, just an ordinary man worn down by honest labor. Facing him were 8 professional soldiers with military-grade weapons and combat training. "Leave the family alone," he said. His voice carried no anger, no aggression, no fear. Just calm, absolute certainty that what he was saying was right. Thexgan's first mistake was assuming humans fought like every other species in the galaxy. He expected Taemin to either back down in fear or charge forward in blind rage. Neither happened. Instead, Taemin waited. When the first enforcer rushed him with an energy baton raised high, Taemin simply stepped aside and grabbed the alien's wrist. Using the attacker's own momentum, he spun the enforcer around and sent him crashing directly into his teammate. The energy baton flew from the first alien's grip, and Taemin caught it without even looking. "Impossible," Kethva whispered, his 4 eyes wide with shock. That level of spatial awareness should require military training. But Taemin was just getting started. When the third enforcer tried to grab him from behind, the human construction worker dropped low, swept the alien's legs, and used the falling body as a shield against the fourth attacker's weapon blast. It wasn't brutal fighting. It was something far more disturbing to the watching scientists. It was intelligent fighting. Taemin turned the enforcer's own strength and aggression against them, like redirecting water, instead of trying to stop a flood. Yet what truly shocked the alien observers was happening around the main fight. Without any spoken word or signal, other humans throughout the bar began moving with perfect coordination. Cargo handler Seung Ho didn't join the fight directly. Instead, he dropped to his knees beside little Silny, who was still crying on the floor, and gently helped her to safety behind the bar. Merchant Do Yun positioned himself near the entrance, not to escape, but to block any reinforcements from entering. He looked calm, almost casual, but his stance made it clear that no more enforcers were getting through that door. Station maintenance worker Hyun Sik began evacuating the few remaining non-human patrons, guiding them quickly but safely toward the emergency exits. At the same time, he picked up a dropped stun rod and smoothly joined the defensive line forming around the Kree family. "They're working together," Velnis breathed, her tentacles trembling as she watched the impossible coordination unfold. But how? There's no communication network, no command structure, no prior planning. Engineer Do Yun seemed to know exactly when bartender So Young needed help moving furniture to create barriers. Security officer Jin Woo appeared at precisely the right moment to prevent an enforcer from flanking Taemin. Medic Mi Jung positioned herself perfectly to treat injuries while staying out of the combat zone. It was like watching a single organism with multiple bodies, each part knowing instinctively what the others needed. "Check the communication frequencies," Kethvar ordered frantically. "Hidden radio signals, telepathic implants, something. This level of coordination is scientifically impossible." But their instruments showed nothing. No technology, no signals, no explanation for how 7 humans who had never worked together before were functioning like a perfectly trained military unit. The enforcers, despite their superior weapons and training, found themselves completely outmaneuvered by what should have been a random collection of civilians. The battle unfolding below their observation post defied every law of psychology and biology that Kethvar knew. His instruments were going crazy, registering readings that shouldn't be possible from any known species. When cargo handler Xiong Ho found himself facing 2 enforcers at once, he didn't call for help or panic. Somehow, Security Officer Jin Woo just appeared at his side, moving into position as if they'd practiced the maneuver 1,000 times. There was no hesitation, no confusion about who should do what. "They're brainwaves," Velnis whispered, staring at her biological scanners in disbelief. "They're synchronizing. Look at these readings. Their stress hormones are matching. Their neural activity is creating patterns I've never seen before." It was like watching separate musicians somehow create perfect harmony without sheet music or a conductor. Engineer Do-yoon seemed to know exactly when Merchant Mi-jung needed someone to watch her back. Maintenance worker Hyun-sik moved to support bartender So-young before she even realized she needed help. But what disturbed Kethvar most wasn't their coordination. It was their restraint. These humans were clearly winning the fight, yet they weren't trying to hurt their enemies more than necessary. When Enforcer Kekton stumbled and fell, human construction worker Taemin could have delivered a devastating blow. Instead, he simply took the alien's weapon and moved on to the next threat. Even more shocking, bartender So-young was actually treating an injured Enforcer's wounds while the battle continued around her. The same alien who had moments before been trying to terrorize an innocent family was now receiving medical care from his opponent. "This makes no sense," Kethvar muttered, watching the impossible scene unfold. "They're showing mercy to enemies who showed them none." The biological readings were becoming even stranger. The humans' heart rates were elevated but steady. Their adrenaline levels were high but controlled. Most remarkably, their brain activity showed the kind of complex coordination usually seen only in hive mind species, except humans were supposed to be individuals. "They're not just fighting together," Velnis realized, her voice filled with awe and terror. "They've become something larger than the sum of their parts, a temporary collective consciousness based on shared moral purpose." The entire confrontation lasted exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds. When it ended, all 8 hegemony enforcers were on the ground, disarmed and defeated. But they were alive, conscious, and receiving medical attention from the same humans who had just beaten them. The Kree family huddled together, safe and unharmed. Little Silni had stopped crying and was peeking out from behind the bar where Xiong Ho had protected her. Her parents looked stunned but grateful. Murphy's bar showed minimal damage. A few overturned tables, some spilled drinks, one cracked wall panel. For a fight involving multiple armed combatants, the destruction was remarkably light. Most unsettling of all, the humans were already returning to normal behavior. They helped the enforcers to their feet, offered them water, and waited calmly for station security to arrive. "They won," Kethvar whispered. "Strangers working together defeated trained soldiers through pure cooperation." Station Security Chief Morgax arrived with 6 officers, expecting to find a bloody battlefield. Instead, he discovered something that made him question his 30 years of law enforcement experience. The 8 hegemony enforcers sat quietly on the floor, nursing various injuries, but clearly alive and conscious. The humans who had defeated them were calmly cleaning up spilled drinks and helping to straighten overturned furniture. No one was shouting, threatening, or even looking particularly angry. "What happened here?" Morgax demanded, his reptilian eyes scanning the surprisingly peaceful scene. "Assault on civilians," construction worker Tai-min replied simply, rolling up his sleeves to show bruised knuckles. "We stopped it. That was it. No dramatic speeches, No attempts to justify their actions, no demands for justice. Just a simple statement of fact that left the security chief scratching his scaled head. Kethavar watched from his observation post as the humans gave their statements with remarkable consistency and honesty. They answered every question directly, provided accurate details about the fight, and showed no signs of the aggressive behavior he'd expected to see after combat. "This is wrong," he muttered, reviewing the footage again. "Species that engage in violence should show elevated stress responses for hours afterward. Look at their vital signs. They're almost back to normal already." Wellness was conducting remote interviews through their communication system, trying to understand what had driven the humans to such coordinated action. The answers she received made no logical sense. "Why did you get involved?" she asked cargo handler Seung-ho, who was bandaging a cut on his arm. "Kid was hurt," he answered, as if that explained everything. "Couldn't just sit there and watch." "But you didn't know the family personally?" Seung-ho looked confused by the question. "So? They needed help." Wellness tried a different approach with Merchant Do-yun, who was helping an injured enforcer sit upright against the wall. "What made you think you could win against trained soldiers?" "Wasn't thinking about winning," Do-yun replied, offering the enforcer a glass of water. "Was thinking about stopping them from hurting people. But the risk to yourself." "What risk?" Engineer Mi-jung interrupted from across the room, where she was repairing a damaged table. "We were all together." That word again, together. As if the mere presence of other humans during a crisis created some kind of automatic alliance that transcended individual safety concerns. Bartender. So Young was perhaps the most puzzling of all. She had administered first aid to the same enforcers who had threatened her customers. Treating their wounds with the same care she would show her friends. "Why help them after they attacked you?" Wellness asked. "They were hurt," So Young replied matter-of-factly. "That's what you do when someone's hurt." The alien researchers stared at their screens in growing bewilderment. These humans had no master plan, no secret training, no hidden agenda. They had simply seen strangers in danger and automatically responded as a unified group. Dr. Kethavar stared at his computer screen for 20 minutes before finally deleting every file from his original research. 8 months of work, hundreds of reports, thousands of hours of evidence, all of it completely wrong. His hands trembled slightly as he began typing a new assessment that would change everything the Galactic Confederation thought they knew about humanity. "Wellness, start recording my final report," he said, his voice carrying a mix of excitement and embarrassment. Everything we believed about human psychology was backwards. Below them in Murphy's bar, the humans were already back to their normal evening routines. Construction worker Taemin sat at the counter with a fresh beer, chatting with bartender So Young about the upcoming station maintenance schedule. His bruised knuckles were the only sign he'd just defeated 8 armed soldiers. "Their behavior isn't mental illness," Kethavar continued dictating. "It's advanced social evolution. Humans have developed the ability to form instant cooperative groups with complete strangers based on shared moral principles." Merchant Do-yun was teaching the rescued Kree child a simple card game while her parents spoke quietly with station security. Engineer Mi-jung had fixed the damaged furniture and was now helping other customers plan their trade routes. Cargo handler Seung-ho was buying drinks for the Thraxian pilots who'd witnessed the fight. Everything looked completely normal, as if risking their lives for strangers was just another Tuesday evening activity. Their so-called irrational empathy creates tactical advantages that purely logical species cannot achieve, Kethavar continued. They can coordinate complex operations without communication technology, training, or prior planning. This makes them incredibly effective in crisis situations. Wellness reviewed the biological data they'd collected during the fight. The synchronization patterns are still showing up in our scans. Even now, hours later, the humans in that bar are still slightly connected to each other on a neurological level. Recommendation: immediate full Confederation membership, Kethavar stated firmly. Furthermore, we should request human military advisors for our own defense forces. These beings don't fight for conquest or resources. They fight to protect others. In a galaxy where most species flee from conflict, humanity produces natural guardians. The response from the Confederation Council came faster than Kethvar had ever seen. Within 6 hours, humanity was granted full membership status. Within 3 days, the Zentari Republic, the Kelleran Union, and the Thraxian Federation had all formally requested human military consultants. Most surprisingly, the aggressive hegemony faction suddenly announced they were reviewing their refugee policies and withdrawing from several contested territories. Word traveled fast in galactic politics. Nobody wanted to face an enemy that could turn random civilians into coordinated warriors simply by threatening innocent people. Kethvar added one final personal note to his report. We called them mentally unstable because they cared about strangers. We said they were dangerous because they helped others before helping themselves. We were afraid of them because they made moral choices instead of logical ones. But maybe that's exactly what this galaxy needs more of.